Hello, everyone. Welcome. I've actually got to follow up Evan after his previous session, if anybody was in here for the reporting session. That was really good. So hopefully, I'll be able to actually give you some good pointers in this session coming up. The topic of this session is Orchestrator or Subflow. And it's a bit of a controversial topic to potentially, because I'll talk to you a little bit more later, but Orchestrator does have a costed element to it. So this is where it might get a little bit controversial, because I'm kind of going, can you do this for free instead of potentially paid? And I'll talk about that in a little bit, how Orchestrator is potentially paid. But just to introduce myself, for those who don't know me, my name is Mark Jones. I am a Salesforce consultant at Cloud Galacticos. But first, we want to say thank you to our sponsors, and who we couldn't be able to do this event without. So just, again, introduce myself a little bit. I am a full-time Salesforce certified professional. I co-lead a couple of different initiatives, a couple of different groups, one being Admin Skills Group with the Salesforce.org open source commons team, as well as a local user group in my area. And ironically enough, because I'm speaking on automation, I am actually co-founding a conference in November this year on process automation. So if anybody is really big on automation and loves either side of the spectrum, whether it's pro code or low code, we would love to hear from you. And we are looking for speakers right now, and submissions are open still. And we are probably going to be extending submissions a little bit. We don't want to just hear flow stuff. We want to hear from other side of the spectrum as well, in terms of code side. It will be virtual. Yes, it'll be virtual this year. Potential hybrid in future years, but for the first one, we're going to be doing it virtually. And for this session, just so you know, I would diagnose myself as a flow fanatic, although I'm not one of those flow fanatics who will turn around and say, everything should be in flow. Just don't tell the Salesforce admin team that. But because we need to ensure that we are building flows well. But that's enough about me. Let's do a little quick plug, because I've recently been involved in setting up a series with Salesforce admins where they're going through the 14 admin skills each week. And ironically enough, this week, coming on Tuesday on the admin blog, is process automation. So if you are so inclined, I would love for you to check out the Salesforce admin blog on Tuesday and read the post that's coming out on process automation. Okay, that's all the rabbiting done. Let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of the subject. And this is going to be looking at Flow Orchestrator versus Subfloors. Now, prior to the session, I put out a poll on the Hoover app just to see how many people had used Orchestrator before. And not necessarily a surprise on my side, but out of the 33 people who responded, only 7 have used Orchestrator. And 26 have said they haven't used it. And that's not necessarily uncommon. I do feel there's a bit of almost like a dynamic forms type of style, almost hesitancy with Orchestrator because of what we don't really know about Orchestrator in terms of the costings specifically with that. But just to give a bit of an overview of what Orchestrator is, in very layman's terms, it is a collaborative add-on for Flow that is available on a freemium scale. And I'll talk about that in just a second in the slides. But the whole idea is it's designed to help companies and organizations build complex, streamlined processes that will pass tasks between users and multiple teams. And you can do that for more than one person. It does not just be a single user. But it's designed so that you don't have to be just one person working with this particular flow. Now, some key points on this. This is where the freemium bit comes in. Currently, companies get 600 free runs of Orchestrator per year. After that, orchestrations are run on a costed basis. Now, this is where it also gets a bit of a pain at times, but at the moment, the way orchestration runs are classified as it counts as a trigger, essentially. So anytime an orchestration is fired, it counts as a run. It can fail, it doesn't have to be completed, or anything like that to be counted in your 600 runs. So companies should really be careful as to how much they do when it comes to those run counts. Orchestrators are grouped into stages, steps, and decisions. And in terms of steps, these can be assigned to users, groups, and queues. You can also assign these on a more individual level via what's called resources. So you can do user resources, group resources, or queue resources. For the non-resource ones, they basically just work almost like a lookup field inside an orchestrator. But you can do, on the resources one, groups and queues work on IDs, and users work on the username. I don't know why, personally, the decision was made to go with usernames rather than IDs, but it runs on usernames. So if you're working with that, that's something to make a note of. In terms of steps, there's two different types. There's background and interactive. And background steps are auto-launch flows. So they're not record-triggered flows, not scheduled. They are auto-launch flows. And interactive steps are screen flows. And these have to be combined into Orchestrator, essentially. So you have to create all of your flows that you're going to be using in Orchestrator separately, and then you create an orchestration where you bring those flows in. When a step is assigned, the relevant users are receive an email. At the moment, that email is not currently customizable. And usually what you get is you get an email which says a step has been assigned to you, and you get the label of the step. I would love to see that be able to be customized in the future, because sometimes it can, I don't like making unnecessary complicated labels, so I would potentially like to customize the message, but that isn't available just yet. And then that's a little bit on Orchestrator. Interactive steps are completed via a component called work guide. Now that's Orchestrator, and I'm not going to build an orchestration in this session. I'm going to demo an orchestration, but you will get to see the orchestrator from the back end inside of Flow Builder. And also, little tip for myself, I would honestly recommend people really start to leverage using templates, Flow templates, which is available just in the advanced section. There's a little checkbox you can click to say it's a template. I would recommend using that quite a lot when it comes to building orchestrations, because what it makes possible is it means you can easily pick up an existing flow from your templates and just change what you need to inside that flow, and you can, whether it's object, relationships, and that kind of thing. So I would recommend using templates quite often when using Orchestrator. Subfloors. Now, hopefully, I'll be not teaching anything new here, but subfloors are really just simply another flow that you can create that you can place into an existing flow to launch it. So you have a flow that controls it, and then your subflow would be launched inside of your main flow. In terms of this, so trying to compare it to Orchestrator, there's not really any limits to how many subflows you can have, to my knowledge, in that. If someone is more knowledgeable on Flow than I am and wants to correct me, please feel free. But to my knowledge, there's no limit as to how many subflows you can use. The limits would come within your standard flow limits, so like how many loops and that kind of thing. There's no additional costing to using subflows. Subflows are part of the core Salesforce product, and there's no limitations on that side, I think, as mentioned. Auto-launched and screen flows can be mixed together by using subflows. So you can do exactly those two same flows, so you have to use an orchestrator. You can mix them in this methodology we'll be going through today. And the methodology that we are going to go through today does actually expect that you launch it via a screen flow. And you use that to govern that via the app build component, which I will be using for Flow. Subflows can technically be assigned to specific users. This can sometimes get a little bit complex, and I will talk to you briefly with the single bit I had to do. It's not too complicated, but I've had to do some tweaks in my flow to get it to work for the specific users. And subflows can also be assigned to groups and queues as well inside of that. Technically, it's not technically an assignment, it's a bit of a hack, which is what we do oftentimes as Salesforce professionals. But you can do that, but you have to also include things like get elements to bring up your groups and your queues inside of that. And then last point, and this is the whole point of the presentation. By using subflows with a screen flow, you can essentially create orchestrations without using Orchestrator. So that's my little bit here, and that's where it might get controversial, because I do quite actually think Orchestrator is quite good, but at the same time, I think you can also do exactly the same thing, for the most part, by using the screen flow. Now, I'm going to show you, I'll be showing you a bit of a demo, but here's the use case I've got for this. I've decided to go with holiday requests because it's approaching the summer, and I thought it was a use case that was general enough where we could use some customization, and also we all have to submit holiday requests, generally speaking, unless we're self-employed or whatever. And oftentimes they have to have a decision made. So we'll be using a screen flow to replicate an approval in here, which is often demoed with Orchestrator as well. So in terms of these very specific requirements I've got for this use case, which is shown off, staff members will be accessing the holiday card to check the current balance of their annual leave, which is all on one object. They'll then create a new leave request, which will be submitted to their manager. The line manager will then look at the holiday card and also review their request. And if my slides decide to progress, there you go. The line manager will then make a decision of whether to approve or decline said request. When the decision is made, we want to see the record updated to reflect that decision. If the request is approved, some statistics will need to be updated. And this is all done inside of Salesforce. And if declined, the record should simply just say it's being declined. The process was only run if the leave request has a submission status of pending. Realize I've made a typo on my slides, I'll update after the session. And leave requests should ideally be submitted on an automated basis. Now in this one, they are going to be submitted on an automated basis, which is what we're going for. And this will be my last slide before we get into the demo. So we've got with two custom objects. We've got the holiday card object, the holiday request object, and in this one, there is 5 flows in total that will be used. If you wanted to create, you can create as many flows as you want within orchestrations and this, but for this purpose, we're doing a fairly simple flow. So there's only 5 that we're working with. And 2 of them are actually the flows that control the process. We've got the orchestration flow. We've got my governing screen flow, which will be used separately. And then we've got 3 flows that are attached to those things. So we've got one for submitting the leave request, one for making the decision, and one for kind of doing the confirmation. So, and I've also got some Lightning App pages as well with holiday card requests. And this work guide component is added to the holiday request page. And this has a custom visibility rule to hide it for the demo. And the screen flow one has the same. Okay, so I've waffled on enough. Shall we have a look at Salesforce and see how this is working? Okay, so let me shift on into my other user, because to deal with this, I've got to switch between browsers because I've got 2 different users I'm working through. So this is the holiday card screen here. You can see my fictitious user. Is that big enough for people, or do I need to make it bigger? Great, okay. So we've got my fictitious cafe, where the member staff who's probably a barista, haven't decided what their job is yet, possibly a barista, possibly she might be doing HR or something like that, but she wants to put in a holiday request. We can see here that Catherine's got 28 days holiday, and she hasn't used any yet this year. So Catherine's going to come over to the Related tab, and is going to put in a holiday request. Now, you might see here these lists. This is not part of my demo, but this is dynamic related lists. So if you ever want to see what that is a bit like, this is what we've got. So I'm going to come and create a new record. And we've got some fields here to fill in. For this particular demo, I do have an additional pick list, which would not be used in a real-life use case, but for this demo, it is, because it's going to be what triggers which flow we're going to show. So I'm going to select my demo scenario is Orchestrator, and Catherine is requesting the holiday. I'm going to put in the line manager as myself, and we're going to leave the date and time of the request to be default. And I do realize as I'm looking at the screen, my Salesforce is not dynamically updated by time zone. So it is technically an hour behind. Holiday card, going to link it to the main card. And for the holiday, we're going to just say the 29th of June. I know nobody would say like at least a month's notice, but for this one, it's going to be fine. And for the reason for request, we're just going to put down something in there. I want to visit Amsterdam for the weekend. And I realize I spelled that wrong. And we're going to submit that. And we're going to click on Save. Now, because this is Catherine's account, if I come over to this tab I've set up here for approval request, you will see here that the work guide is showing that there's some work to be done. And this is the screen flow for submitting. Now, I will be going back and forth between screens, so if you bear with me one moment, I'm going to switch back over to my screen and come into here. And I'm in this as my account, and I'm as the admin. We can see here that there's a holiday request pending the decision. And I come in, and if I come here, you can see here on the work guide that there's no work assigned to myself. This is because I'm in here obviously as the admin / the line manager. So I shouldn't have anything to do at this stage. So we can see here that the orchestration is working as expected. If I go back to Catherine's profile, I can click on here, and you can customize these as much as what you think is needed. But for this one, I've just said, look, I want just Catherine to confirm, yes, this is ready to be submitted for approval. So Catherine's now going to click on Confirm Request. And you see here, there is a work note to say the work item has been completed, and there's no more tasks to be done. Now, as I said, you do get an email, so I will now have an email in my inbox, which is an email I don't really like, so I'm not going to show that up on the screen. I really don't like those emails. But if I refresh the page, just so you can see, you will see here that the approval has been submitted. And basically now, it's up to me to make a decision. So I'm going to come back, and I will refresh this page and go back to my approval tab. And you'll see here, I've got my second screen flow, which is my decision. And I'm just going to say approved and confirm. And when I click on close and refresh, this should now be reflected that we've approved this decision, as we can see here. So that's Orchestrator in practice. Now, I'm going to go back into Catherine. I'm going to create a second one so we can demo the screen flow. So I'm going to come back into here. Also, you should see now that they've moved into via my dynamic related lists. Always nice when that works as expected. But now I'm going to create a new request. And this one, if I can spell Catherine's name, there we go. We're going to use the screen flow demo in here. So I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to do a holiday card. And I'm going to say 30th of June. And say I want to stay in Amsterdam. Very good point. Thank you for keeping me right. This will not work if I don't put myself down. So there we go. So now that I've got myself down correctly as the line manager, this should now be ready to go. So let me click on Save. And I'll come back, and you'll see there, again, this screen is here now. Now let me flow back to myself and show you how this looks inside of my view. If I come out of the previous one, we'll go to the pending holiday request. And inside the screen flow, you can see this little bit of text that tells me that I can't do anything at this stage because I am not the user who submitted the request. This is good. This is what we would want to see inside a flow for this particular use case. So basically, I've got to go back as Catherine in this demo, or in real-world use case, Catherine would have to be the one doing the next step. So let's go back as Catherine and confirm that Catherine is ready to submit the request. Again, same flows we had before. Nothing's any different. It's just the method that we're using. And you can see here there's a little note to say that the record has been successfully updated. And we say there's nothing to do further until a decision has been made. Now, if we click on Continue here, this will show you something else as well. Here's another message which tells Catherine that Catherine is not the line manager that has to approve the record, and therefore Catherine can't do anything else with this flow. If I go back into my profile here and refresh the page, we should now see that I've got the decision flow that was shown before. And I can click on here, Approved, and I can click on Confirm Decision, and you'll see there that the decision has been made, and this will now be displayed on the record. Now, if I close that, we've got this little note that says the decision has been made. Please see below the section here. And one thing you might have noticed there, differently to Orchestrator, is that when I clicked on Closed, the values appeared. That doesn't always happen with Orchestrator on the side. So this can update very quickly behind the scenes. And again, if I go back and refresh as Catherine, you can see there that the decision has been made. So in there, I've just done exactly the same thing was able to do with Orchestrator inside a flow. Now, shall I show a little bit of how we did that? So let's go into Setup. And in Setup, we're going to go to our flows. And please don't judge me on naming convention. I'm still trying to decide what naming convention I want to use and what I'm working through. And this is the one I'm experimenting with at the moment. So here I've got two ones here. Yeah, I've got my holiday request, guided process, manage approval request, and I've got a shared guided process. The shared guided process is the orchestration. The unshared guided process is the normal flow that I've used for screen flow here. Now, I might change that a little bit probably next week, but this is what I'm using here. Now, here's the orchestration. And I can't zoom in on this one, but you can see here if I click on the edit screen, the criteria I've set up where basically the flow will launch when a holiday request is created and the submission status is pending. This is a tip I would want to give out for Orchestrator, certainly, like to avoid firing your orchestrations all the time. I would really recommend that people be very specific, or as specific as they can, on the entry criteria, because that will save the orchestrations firing all the time. And as I say, to counting your runs when it fires. So I would really recommend using entry criteria where possible. And in this, you can see here, I've got my steps. And nothing really overly too fancy here. But you can see here, I've got my flow in there. You can see that you can specify the record page it needs to live on. I've used my user resource, and I've pulled in the username from the lookup field. And then I can move on with that. You can see here, I've got my submit flow. Again, all I'm passing through there into there is the record ID. And with the final step, again, I'm only really passing the username of the manager in there. So I'm not actually passing anything massive in there. I'm just literally getting the usernames and passing them into it and the record ID. That's all I'm working with in this flow to make it work. So it's a relatively simple orchestration. Now compare this to this screen here. Now let me just put this on full so you can see that. Now, I know with for those of us who've seen flows on Twitter have probably seen flows that are like 1 million times bigger than this. However, what this is really is it's using primarily decision elements and assigns and subflows to do the work. There's actually not really a great deal going on here in this flow. So when we first log in, we ask straight away, what's the status of it? Is it pending or is it not pending? Has some kind of decision been made? Or has it been submitted? If it's not been pending, it'll go to the not pending path. And if it's pending, it'll ask for 2 decisions here, we can see. And we can see here, we've got a decision here. Is the person who is accessing the flow, is running the flow, is that person the same as who is the one requesting the holiday in this instance? And you can see here, I'm actually using the formula field to check who the user ID is. Now, this was because when I was testing this, the local relationships were returning 18 character IDs, and the user global variable was returning 15. Now, in my testing of this, what I found was if I didn't trim the characters down to 15, the flow would fail. Now, I'm going to use air quotes there specifically because the flow worked. There was no error messages came through. I received nothing to indicate that the flow had failed, but the flow did nothing. Now, my assumption is that's because it's working with the 15 character IDs, and I would like to think I'm correct on that, but if anybody knows I'm wrong, please again do tell me. But that's what I found. I found the flow did not work, but I got no error messages. So I've trimmed the formulas down. And all I've done here is just literally create a formula for each of the IDs I'm working with. We can see here, let's go to the manager one, for example. I've just done basically a left trim formula where I ask for the first 15 characters. That's all I've asked for. And that's all you need, really, with this to make this work. And I've done this for both the manager and the user ID. So if you're working with multiple users in this one, you might need to do multiple formulas, but for this, because there's only going to be 2, I've only needed 2. And then you can see here, we've got our first subflow, which is the same ones we had before. And you can see here, we're not actually even passing anything into here, because this is the one where we confirm the leave request. So there's not actually anything being passed through, it's just using the subflow. From here, I actually set a confirmation value, which say the submission's been confirmed, and this is just to then fire off a decision. And what this does, so this is a bit more, the reason for this I've put this in is to be on the safe side. Probably didn't actually need this, but what I wanted to do was to make sure that if the submission had been submitted properly, it would run to the next stage. If it hadn't been submitted, it would go back and ask the user to do it again to make sure that things are done right. And if it's been, and you can see here, unchecked, there's nothing here at all. It just loops back to the confirm leave request subflow. From there, it submits the request as mentioned before and submits it. And there's a single screen here, which just basically says, the record's been updated. So that's all there is in that first path. And this is the bigger path of the 2. There's not, so you can see there's not a lot there. And you can see here I've got a screen there which says, if you're not the right person, in the politest sense, you can't do anything with this record because you aren't the person who needs to submit this for approval. Then in the not pending stage, I've got a decision for checking the status. If it's been submitted for approval, it'll run through. And if it's not submitted for approval, the only option left in this one is that the decision's been made. That is my default path. I'm not a big fan of using default outcome as the label. So you'll never ever see me in the flow having default outcome. So that's why I have those labels there. And you can see here for the decisions being made. So very simple stuff. This isn't necessarily rocket science, but it's just showing you how simply you can recreate something that you would do in Orchestrator inside of here. And again, I've got another decision similar to what I had on my initial one when it was being pending to say, is the user now who's accessing this flow the manager? And again, your symbol is the user ID, the same as the manager ID with the trimmed to 15-character formula. If it is, it's going to ask them to make a decision, and we pass the record ID into the subflow there. And then if it isn't the manager, we pull in this to say you're not that person either. And I think this actually is potentially quite a nice way of doing it. Now, again, this is a very simple version of it, but I actually quite like how I've been able to customize the messages on there and go, you're not the user who needs to submit this record, please submit. Because at the moment, we can't actually do this with the work guide. We can't customize this, and this could potentially, while it's a little bit more work, this whole, both the orchestration and the screen flow, probably took me about 4 hours overall to build and test. So not a huge amount of time. And again, it's a fairly simplistic flow for that. But the thing that really stands out to me in this is the screens that we can use with the custom messaging. I think that's the big takeaway, because I don't know about you, but I really sometimes love when you get like some of these email messages, like the automated ones, or you get the error messages where it doesn't really tell you what's gone wrong, and you've got to do a lot more work. I like being able to, where possible, have it so it's literally as simple as possible for people to go, you're not that user, please, you can't do anything else with this. Or and that's the reason why I quite like stuff like in-app guidance and stuff like that. I like trying to make things as simple as we can for users. So that's the screen flow. And that's really the whole bug of what I wanted to show off in this. So a very simplistic way of doing it, but I think it's potentially quite a good model for that. And I realize I'm a bit early. We have about probably a little bit of time that we have for Q&A, if anybody has any questions. And I see Chris has got his hand straight up. Do we have a Robin, or? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I understood there are ways to balance Orchestrator versus Subflows. Yeah. I would like to go into a detail of your presentation, and that is your naming convention on the left-hand side. So, which is awesome. I loved it. But I have one tiny question. You used abbreviations for the display screen, EN, CS1, and stuff like that.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Because everything else was self-explanatory, why I loved it.
Yeah. So which bit was it? Was it the API names?
Yeah.
Or was it? Yeah.
The elements in the flow.
Yeah. So again, I keep experimenting with Screen with the naming conventions. I tend to try and use probably a slightly butchered version of camel case. It's a common naming convention from the developer side if you have some developer mindsets. But basically, my logic, and let me just pull up an example if I find here. So here, let's pull up one for inside of Orchestrator. You can see here, I've got step, because I wanted to be clear because I work as a consultant, so I want to build my flows in a way that whoever the poor person is who's got to come and work with my flow after me, if it's not me or one of my team members, knows exactly what they're working with. Normally, I'd try and put in a description here as well, but I didn't need to for the demo. So here I've got step, and I've got S1 confirm request. S1 in this scenario is literally stage 1, step 1. If I go to my background step for that one, you can see there it's S1, S2, stage 1, step 2. So hopefully, again, I am more than open to hear other people tell me like you could do better with name conventions because I think we all want to learn the best ways to do things. I want to keep this as simple as I can for them. If I go to my API here, you can see here, hopefully in big enough on the screen, but if you can't, let me actually zoom in, see if I can zoom in. There we go. So here, again, maybe not necessarily the most perfect thing to do, but I've got FO, Flow Orchestrator. I normally try and start off my flows with the type of flow that it is. So if I'm doing like a record triggered flow, I'll do RTF. And then what I do is for here I've got the object, or an abbreviation for the object, so HR, holiday request, SGP, again, shared guided process, and then manage approval requests. So what I try and do at the very end of my APIs is have something that actually sort of tells you what on earth it's meant to be. Again, I'm not saying I'm perfect on it by any means, but that's kind of what I've been trying to do with my name conventions more recently. If I'm doing, like, say, a formula, I'll do form or formula, and then something to try and describe what actually that form is meant to be. And I try and keep it, again, as simple as I can because I, again, work as a consultant. And I don't know if for anybody else who's been in as a consultant, but I did have a scenario recently where a colleague asked me, Mark, have you made changes to these flows? And I looked at the changes that he said had been mentioned. I looked at the naming convention and goes, nope, that's not me. So from an accountability perspective, if you have good naming conventions and somebody else uses a slightly different one, it actually helps you know kind of like what you've done as well. Because sometimes, as consultants, dare I say, we share licenses, and which makes it quite hard for accountability perspective at times, because you get last modified by whoever has got the name for the license. And I'm quite big on trying to make sure, who's done what, and that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers your question there, Christian. And is there any other questions? Yes. Oh, great, we've got a microphone.
Hi there. Yeah, I think it's a great presentation and a very astute example, because I think that people feel that Flow Orchestrator is going to replace the last man standing, which is, the approvals process that's left behind. Yeah. Do you think that when that comes to fruition, that purchase limit will going to be challenged? Because I know from my own experience over the years, there's a number of customers with a lot of approval processes and a lot of users doing them.
Yeah. It's very hard to tell. I would like to think that the limit's going to be reviewed. I do think at some point there will be, because initially, the thing I didn't say at the beginning is, like, initially when Orchestrator was launched, the questions were coming to the product team going, is this going to replace approval processes? And right when it first came out, the message was, no, this is not going to use approval processes. But then probably about a few weeks ago, maybe almost a month ago now, we had the release readiness live sessions for the summer of 22 release has just come out. And the question was asked again. And this was the first time that they even dropped a hint that they were thinking about changing this over. And it wasn't a confirmed, yes, it's going to replace approval processes, but the language was, it's something that we're looking at as Salesforce. I personally think it will at some point, because, and this was something I actually didn't really know until someone at Salesforce told me this at the World Tour. Approval processes is apparently built on the same engine as workflow rules. So if you think about it, with the retirement coming up in 2025 of workflow rules, the end of life, they can't really end of life it properly if approval processes are still a thing in the way that they currently are, because you would still need that engine to be active. So they can't fully end of life it. So I think it is going to be replaced, and I think with that, I would like to think that rule would be reviewed. One thing I didn't mention about the runs specifically, and I possibly should have done, is those runs don't apply for sandboxes or for DevOps, which is great to know for us for testing. So we don't have any issues with that, but in production, that's where the limits come in. But I like to think that the limits will be reviewed very soon. Very soon. I'll try not to get on the sandbox about the pricing. I disagree with it entirely.
Mark, thanks for the presentation. I have a different question. If you can pull up again the Flow version of making the decision. You indicated it's taking quite a big landscape, but what are your thoughts about the different paths when you make the decisions at first to combine that in the first decision point? So instead of having like 4 decisions, you can have 1 decision with different paths. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we could do that. The reason I chose for this one, I want to keep it as simple as possible. We could have had that, but for me, my logic was, okay, I want to see what the status is first, and then I want to check who the user is straight away. That could have been done as in one step, but my thinking was, what happens if somebody else is viewing this record? straight away. I want them to be able to hop in and have a look. Again, I'm not saying I've done it necessarily the best way. You could do it in one. This for me was I preferred that way of doing it for this particular demo.
I think I was clear with my question. I meant is that you have 4 decision points before coming to the stage where you have a different screen. And those 4 points, you can also have it in one decision. So it's more last landscape, and it doesn't look that big. Just as a matter of taste, and I was wondering if you would combine the 4 of them into just one decision point.
Yeah, so for these 4 decisions, yeah, I think you could combine the top 4 potentially into one, but as I said, for me, I preferred this kind of way of doing it specifically for this. I think, personally for me, I think it makes it look a bit cleaner, a bit crisper, and that's but again, that's more of a personal preference. I don't think would be any issue necessary with doing that. With one decision.
No, clear. It's a matter of taste indeed. On the other hand, sometimes you have bigger flows, and that's just a way of making flows smaller.
Yeah, I think it just looks a bit cleaner. Cool. Any other questions? Just checking time. Yeah. Any other questions? Or yes.
I just wonder if you have this example that you have shown to us today written in any of your blog or something. It just happened that I'm kind of like working on something similar like this. I'm just
Yeah. So the short answer to that is this isn't on my blog, but the parentheses onto that answer is yet. It is something that will be drafted. I honestly have been traveling pretty much since like the back end of May. Been in Prague and then London's Calling World Tour and here today. So this is actually in my draft queue and I need to finish it off because I want to get screenshots and stuff like that in there. And also I'm also trying to work on one about Slack actions as well in Flow. So I've got a couple of big posts on Flow coming out hopefully in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Just depends on how long I need left to finish those off because I've been away from work for quite a while, so I also need to get back to my desk and actually do my day job. But yes, it's coming. Cool. Yes.
First of all, thank you very much. It's really interesting. I was just wondering, when I create a leave request, that part, I then have to separately go to put it for approval. Is it just for the sake of demo or or is there a technical reason that I create my leave request and as an end user, I would think, what do I do next? I don't save it for later. I would immediately go for approval. Would that be possible to have that just in one step? Or is it just for the reason that this is a demo and it's nice to show the different stages?
Yeah, for this it was mainly for the demo. You could just submit the leave request straight away. However, as well, I'm also not opposed to having a confirmation step. I know it's one extra step, but sometimes we work with end users. Sometimes they'll fill in things and they'll go, okay, I put in the holiday, and this tonight, I put in the holiday request for the 30th of June. I actually meant to put in for the 30th of July. We have that kind of thing at times. So I do quite like the idea of doing like a confirmation thing. If I was doing this more fully, I'd probably have like the fields display go, are you sure, this is what you've requested. Please can you confirm that is correct? And if they're not, then they can go back and edit the record prior to submitting. On occasion as well, I haven't done this demo, but I might have even included a validation rule or synced up with a dev and goes, can we use like an Apex methodology to lock that record from being edited by the end user before, while it's being approved. Might look at I might do that as well. But to answer the question, you could submit automatically. That was for the demo. And also I do quite like the idea of having an extra little step just to make sure everything's correct before they submit it. Because you can imagine if they mistakenly fill in some details, and they go back to their manager and goes, oh, sorry, I meant to put this in for like a month's time rather than tomorrow, then it extends the process out a little bit longer than necessary. So it's try and make it as easy to the end user as possible. Okay. Great.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I have one question about the emails that you mentioned. You
Yes.
said that they were not customizable at the time. Do you know if it's possible not to send them, or is this a default option?
For Orchestrator right now, it's default.
Okay.
Yes, there has been some talk about being able to either customize them or do some other things with them, but at the moment it is a default, and it is literally just gives you the label of the orchestration step that's been assigned, and says you've been assigned this step, which is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of it, because I like keeping my labels clean and simple. And if you look at that, you would like my label there was like S1, and then what the step was. You can imagine for an end user getting an email that says, you've now been assigned to step S1, confirm leave request. That doesn't necessarily convey what you're trying to do. So I'd like to be able to customize that. But there's not a way at the moment to replace that with, say, like an email alert or even a custom notification. That email will go out by default. Cool. Any other questions? Great. Well, I think if there's no other questions, I just want to say a big thank you again for coming. I will be around if anybody does have anything to want to ask, or anything that they think I could do better. I'm always ready and willing to hear that as well. So again, thank you for coming, and I'll be around all day. Okay, thank you.